Hello and welcome to a very special episode of Punters Inside Run when we're looking ahead to the big races coming up in spring. Yes, the carnival's up and running and it's in fine form, but Mick Sharkey, there are some huge events that's probably worth talking about if punters want to get in early.
Absolutely, Matty. Yeah, we take well, they're not so far in the future, are they? Races like the Everest and the Caulfield Cup, but I think we've got a pretty clear line of sight on them now. There's still, I think, a little bit of fat in some of the markets for those major races. So, what better time to play?
All right, let's start with the Everest. And we've got favourites, I Wish I Win, which comes out of that Memsey, that run behind Mr. Brightside. Think About It, who went through the grades amazingly last time, didn't he? And all the way through to 2 Group 1s. They're the two in the market. But then you've got sort of Private Eye, Imperatriz, who we'll see run at the Moir on Friday night, and Buenos Noches. So it's a really competitive race, as it should be. What do you think?
Yeah, and you'd expect a horse like In Secret to take up that Godolphin slot. So It's starting to take shape now, isn't it? The Everest a couple of weeks out from game day. Look, I Wish I Win. He's the X Factor sprinter, isn't he? Now that Giga Kick is on the bench, I think I Wish I Win with that turn of foot that he has just makes him such a dangerous horse in any race he goes around in. We've seen him in Sydney winning in brilliant style, effectively beating an Everest field. So he's right at the top of the tree, I think, and justifiably so at around $4.40. I think he's a worthwhile favourite. I would have more of a margin on him and Think About It. I think about it's pretty hard in the market for a horse that hasn't shown probably the brilliance, the dynamism that I Wish I Win has. So I'm a little surprised they're joint at the head of the markets, but the horse that I reckon there's a little bit of value in, Matty, and now that he's got a slot, it's only been announced in the last week or so, is Buenos Noches. I think this is the horse with the sense of timing about him. He's got a really good turn of foot. I think what we've seen from him this spring, as opposed to his autumn campaign when we saw him in Melbourne chasing Lightnings and Newmarkets, is that little bit more maturity. He's got a bit better race sense too. In Melbourne last prep, he was kind of all over the place when he was let off the leash, and now he's got that killer instinct. He knows what to do. He knows how to go and win a race. I think he should have won the shorts. Private Eye won that, and I think Buenos Noches was really unlucky not to win that race. I think he's where the value is at the moment in that Everest market, at around that 850 mark, along with I Wish I Win, who I would probably have close to that 360, 380 mark.
Yeah, there's been a definite whole difference of target with this horse, Buenos Noches, isn't it? So that's your value bet and a save on the favourite, of course, in I Wish I Win, which has that X factor. As we turn our attention to the Cox Plate, we know we've got Amelia's Jewel. We know what we've seen so far from Mr. Brightside. But tell us about this Hong Kong horse, who is the favourite, Romantic Warrior.
Well, he's the dominant middle distance horse in Hong Kong, and we know that form around Golden 60 and the horses that he's been racing against over the last 18 months to 2 years. All the ratings boffins will tell you that it's world class. We get to test it, I guess, with Romantic Warrior in what looks to be a pretty solid Cox Plate. You know, we can get caught up a bit sometimes in the bad news around horses. You know, he's not eating his feed. He's a bit trainer's a bit gun shy of travelling, doesn't know how the horse will settle in. I think everybody that's seen this horse in quarantine at Werribee has just spoken in glowing terms about him. He's back on the fang, Matty. He's eating the feed, so you can't starve. When you're a supreme athlete, you've got to keep eating. So Romantic Warrior's finally decided to chow down, and he's doing well on the new Tucker. So that's a good sign. He's pretty short in the market for mine at $3.70. We've seen good Hong Kong horses come to Australia before, like Lucky 9 a few years ago, only narrowly beaten in a Group 1 sprint at the Valley. They're sprinters. This is a middle distance horse. I'm a little wary at the price, I think. Amelia's Jewel for mine I think she's the best horse in Australia in that mile to 2,000 metre category. She has to prove it. This is the spring where I think Simon Miller expects her to really stand up and go to that top level. I love the Let's Elope win. I think she'll turn up at the Valley on Cox Plate Day with a little picket fence against her name. She's the top seed for me. I just think she's electric, and she's got weapons to get her out of any sort of trouble that she finds herself in. And it basically has got her out of trouble 99% of the time, except in the Quokka when she went down by a nose. So she's some horse. Really looking forward to seeing her in the Cox Plate. As far as value's concerned, maybe there's a bit of fat in the 3-year-olds. Militarize, who Trimmed right up now after the Golden Rose. Victoria Road for Aidan O'Brien coming over. He's a Breeders' Cup juvenile winner. So he does have Group 1 form internationally. Maybe there's a little bit of fat on the bone there with those two, but I think that the top seeds are really separating out nicely in the Cox Plate. Amelia's Jewel for me by a stretch.
All right, Amelia's Jewel there in the Cox Plate. And Supreme Athletes, yes, we do have to keep eating, but not 25 years after you retire. Let's go to the Cups. Let's firstly go to the Caulfield Cups. It looks a bit easy because we don't know. A lot of these horses are going to keep racing before they get to the Melbourne Cup. We'll get your thoughts on that shortly. I like what I saw from Without a Fight in the Underwood on the weekend. It got to the line with Solcombe, and we saw Francesco Guardi in the Maccabi Diva. So there are a couple we've seen. What about some of the horses that we don't know much about?
Yeah, Without a Fight undoubtedly should be the top seed and is, for this race. He's got international 2,400 metre form. He went to Dubai and ran really well behind Hookham, who's Group 1 class in Europe. So he came for the Melbourne Cup last year, and probably a combination of the wet track and didn't stay. We've seen him go back to his right form in Queensland over the winter. Great run in the Underwood. Absolute top seed for me. Japanese horse Breakup. He's an interesting one, Matty. He's a horse that's been tried in group races right throughout his career. He's raced really well in them. He was fourth in the Tenno show recently over 2 miles. I think 2 miles probably stretches him. I reckon he's more of a natural 2,400 metre horse. He's a Group 2 winner over 2,500 metres in Japan and beat a couple of nice horses on that occasion. I don't know if he's as unexposed as a Murder Glass, who won this race a few years ago, but I think he's of similar quality. So Breakup, absolutely a horse to be reckoned with. And a local horse, Matty, that I think's gone way under the radar. The Derby winner from Sydney in the autumn, Major Beale. He's come back really, really well. All 3 runs have been great. He's an out-and-out stayer. I loved his run in the Kingston Town behind Just Fine recently. I think he's not a horse to be taken lightly in the Caulfield Cup if Gai goes that way.
Yeah, and the Just Fine form is looking very, very good indeed this spring so far. And finally to the Melbourne Cup, mate. As I said, a lot of these horses will come through from the Caulfield Cup. But what about ones that are here just for the Melbourne Cup?
Yeah, well, Vauban is probably you're one with a big circle around it at the moment. He's a very, very good handicap stayer who's been pitched into this race, I think, with the weight that he's got. We saw him in Ascot and in Ireland again prior to coming out here. Willie Mullins is a very good trainer. He's gone close in this race before. Remember with Max Dynamite going back a few years now. So this is an absolute grand final race for Vauban. All he has to do, I think, is travel in one piece and settle in well for him to be absolutely the horse to beat on Melbourne Cup Day. It's never a given.
No.
We remember the favourite last year, Dashing Legend, tried, everyone thought that he'd just roll over them and win, and he didn't handle the conditions on the day. So it all comes down to that. From the locals, I think Solcombe obviously is right there and a big chance. I think he'll have a nice run in the Caulfield Cup to prep him up for this. There's a couple though at a price that I reckon we should be looking at, Matty. Just Fine, a horse you mentioned before. He'll go to the Metrop. I think that'll catapult him up the market in the Melbourne Cup. Another one that's just sneaking along. Probably hasn't had the headline space that some of the other locals have had, but John O'Shea's got a horse called Athabaskan, who's a European horse who, since they've gelded him, has just turned right on, and he's been really, really dominant into, I guess, second or third tier staying races in Sydney in recent weeks. But I think he's the sort of horse that could come and perhaps use a Bart Cummings as a way to guarantee a place in the Melbourne Cup.
All right, mate, thank you for that. Time is against us, but we'll see you later in the week where we'll look at the Friday night meeting in Melbourne because of the grand final, and also that big meeting in Sydney where we'll see Just Fine in the Metro. Can't
wait, Matt. It's going to be a great weekend of racing and footy, funnily enough.
Funny enough, grand final weekend. Thanks for joining us on there. I'll look forward here on Punters Inside Run to some of the big events, but as we mentioned, stay tuned for later in the week where we'll take a look at the weekend's racing.
Imagine what you could be buying instead. For free and confidential support, call the number on the screen or visit the website.